If you were paying off a chunk of credit card debt that was nearly as much as your annual income, and you'd been paying month after month after month after month, and you were set to pay the last payment January 2025, would you make an extra effort to get it paid off in December so you started 2025 with no debt? Or would you just wait and make that last payment in January?
In 2021, I have this case come across my desk. Rachel, that's not her real name, of course, for privacy reasons, but she has about as much debt as annual income. Now, my task is to see if she can get this debt paid off and recover the payment she was making to her creditors. Situations like this require some creative thinking and some mathematics, and I was able to figure out a plan. She could pay off her consumer debt in about 2 years and 8 months, and 10 months later, she could have her participating whole life insurance policy replenished with all the money she had borrowed to help with her debt payoff strategy.
John, that's one of the reasons I like about your plans for debt elimination. Your plans not only include getting rid of the debt, but they also include getting back the money that you ended up paying your creditors. So many debt programs out there, they just are a race to zero. Yeah, you get all your debt paid off and then you look around, you got nothing. And that really hinders people from wanting to get to that place, or when they do get to that place, feeling like they have nothing left. Your money has a cost to it. Knowing that, it's important that you recover the money that you spend paying off debt.
Rachel's case was interesting for a few different reasons. When we looked at the 10-20-70 principle with the cash flow that she was spending, and for those of you that are new to the 10-20-70, we take 100% of somebody's income and we use a rule of thumb to divide it up into 10%, 20%, 70%. 70% would be for lifestyle, 20% would be payments to creditors, and 10% would be the minimum amount that you want to be keeping, saving for the future. So we're looking at her cash flow with this 10-20-70 principle in mind, and she's saving about 12% of her income. She's putting that toward her participating whole life insurance policy. She's paying about 30% of her annual income toward payments to creditors, and she's living on a little bit less than 60% of her income.
That's a little bit different than 10-20-70.
Sure is.
It's 12-30, and what's left?
58.
That's not a whole lot to live on, but Rachel's a little bit behind schedule. I mean, she's getting along, and she's not, some young whippersnapper at 20 years old with this debt, and she realizes that she's got to put more away, keeping it, if she's really going to get to that place where she doesn't have that burden of debt for the rest of her life. And so putting that 12% allowed her to reach her goal. And that's one of the things that you do in your plans, because, Michelle, you wrote the last chapter in our book, Prescription for Wealth. Anytime you make a plan, you got to stop and you got to evaluate where you're at in life.
Yes, in that chapter, I talk about going to a mall and, you want to go to a certain store in the mall and you have to look at the kiosk. Well, nowadays, I don't even know if they have kiosks. You can look it up on your phone, find out where's the store located so you know what direction you need to take in the mall. You look at where you're at right now to see what steps you need to take to get there. So you got to go straight, and then you got to make a turn, and then you got to make another turn to get to that place. And that's what we have to do in our finances. We have to take account of where we're at right now, determine where it is we want to go, which store are we headed for, so that we head in the right direction, take the right steps to get there.
Well, Rachel, she had 9 different debts. We had to add them all up and look at the different interest rates between them. The interest rates ranged from 0% on some of the debts to 37%.
37%.
37%.
Wow.
And many of them were in the 20 to 25% range. So those were the debts that we were looking at. And something I look at in these plans is I look at which debt do you go after first. So often when I talk with people that have a lot of consumer debt, they're trying to pay extra maybe on the top 3 or on the top 5. They'll pick some of those with high interest rates or that they're paying a lot on per month, and they'll try to put extra towards several at once. That's not the most effective way to go at it. You want to You want to organize them so that you can focus on one. That's going to let you focus your efforts, get rid of that one as quickly as possible. And once you get rid of one, then that gives you a little bit more cash flow that's freed up per month. Not only does it give you more flexibility, but it also gives you more cash flow to put toward the next step that you're focused on. You use that same strategy to continue focusing on the next priority. Sometimes that's called a snowball.
So I know one of the cases you're working on right now where a couple is facing, tremendous amount of debt. They realize we got to do something about this, and their interest rates are in the 30% type range. And they've kind of been paying extra towards several, but they've even identified one that they think is more important to get rid of. And you just glancing at it say, no, that's
not the most important
that's not going to be the
Right.
most important one. And so I'm really excited for you to develop that plan for them because they're going to be able to get out of that debt more quickly than they realize.
Yes.
That's another reason I like your program that you put together of debt elimination is it follows a biblical principle that we learned from the life of King David. When King David was, a young boy and he had just been crowned king and he came to visit his brothers who were in the army, there was a giant that was taunting the children of Israel and mocking them and mocking God. And David stepped up and alone with a sling and a rock killed that Goliath, that giant Goliath. But Goliath had brothers, and those brothers were not able to be eliminated by David alone. He needed his army. And so when David became king, him and his army went after those other brothers of Goliath, the giant, and they annihilated him. And so by going after the giant in your life that's easiest to conquer and quickest to conquer, gives you more ammunition, gives you an army to go after the others, and then you can really eliminate them instead of struggling with debt all your life.
One of the things that we advocate, which is different than many debt payoff programs, is that we encourage people to start their savings element alongside their debt payoff. Don't just pay off the debt because that's the race to zero that you were talking about earlier, but start something so you'll have a reserve of savings once you finish your debt. You'll have a continued path to redirect the cash flow that you were using to pay off your debts into replenishing your savings reservoir. And we use participating whole life insurance for that. Sometimes when we start, it may take a few months longer. We don't want it to take a huge amount longer, but it's okay for it to take a few months longer to get out of debt if you're also able to start the participating whole life insurance policy, because then that gives you a place to put the money back, and the growth in the policy over a long period of time will offset the interest that you paid during the time you were paying off the debt.
Well, slow and steady wins the race. Aesop's fables taught us that years ago. And when I used to help people lose weight, and they would go on these crash diets without my advice, and they would lose a bunch of weight in 3 or 4 months, and then they would come back a year later, and they'd gained it all back and a few extra pounds. That's often what happens when people race to get out of debt. They really scrimp on their lifestyle, and they scrimp on saving. And so when they get to the end and have nothing to show for it except zero debt, they go, wow, I'm going to run out and get some more debt. And they go out and just spend like crazy. And we've seen so many of these people. Of course, Rachel wasn't one of these, but we've seen so many of these people that come to us after they've gone through this yo-yo cycle of getting out of debt and going back in and getting out of debt and going back in, that when we give them the life insurance policy method like you plan, now they're on the road to victory.
And that's one of the things that you experienced when you were helping people with weight loss plans for them. The number one thing is they have to have the desire to change what's happening. And that's what we saw with Rachel. We saw it before. She was willing to, really buckle down and to save money. And then she continued her plan, because what we didn't see is all the times, over these months and even a few years when she was paying off these debts, we didn't see all the times she could have gone to the store and bought that new handbag or that new pair of shoes or go to the restaurant and buy, something extra. She lived within the parameters that she set for herself because she had a goal. And she also had family and people around her supporting her in that goal. And so she was able to achieve her goals.
That's really important. That's one of the things that we see in people that are successfully able to complete a debt payoff program is they have support from family or friends. They're helping them hold them accountable in a way, but it's more positive than that. Sometimes it's just an encouragement along the way. And Rachel definitely had that. And Rachel contacted us just this month. She ended up finishing a little bit early with her debt payoff plan, and she replenished her participating whole life insurance. That gives people such a sense of fulfillment when now they're not just back at zero, they have their savings replenished too.
It was great to get Rachel's email. She told us that she not only paid off her debt, she was scheduled to pay it off in January, but she wanted to start the new year with no debt. So she paid off the debt in December. Now she wants to purchase a car, and she has options. She can go and get a car loan if that's a good interest rate, or she can turn to her policy because she followed John's plan. Now she has a surplus of money in the policy that she can borrow and purchase that new car.
Her plan is to borrow from the policy because she has the ability to do that, and it's a better interest rate than what she can get someplace else. She's going to make payments back to the policy because now she has the discipline. She's proven to herself that she can make those payments. And in 51 months, which is her plan to repay that policy loan, she's going to have more money in her policy than what she paid for the car because of all the interest and the growth of the policy. And she's going to be able to do something else that's needed in her life without going into debt for it.
When we get back from the break, we're going to talk about how the infinite banking concept works in today's financial environment and how to make better financial goals.
The policy that works best for the infinite banking concept is a dividend-paying whole life insurance policy with a paid-up additions rider. You'll want this policy to be structured to allow the maximum cash value accumulation without creating unnecessary tax consequences or inhibiting the cash value growth for future policy years. At McFie Insurance, we specialize in these types of policies. We are licensed in all 50 states, so no matter where you're located in the U.S., we can help you. Call our office at 702-660-7000 or email us, team@mcfieinsurance.com.
We are constantly working with new people that are just starting the infinite banking concept, and then we have people that have been doing it for years. We ourselves have been using the infinite banking concept for 19 years now, going strong. And although the way we use the infinite banking concept varies because of economic times, the key is that the infinite banking concept always works.
And the beautiful thing is it doesn't just work for debt. We recently recorded a video meeting with Alex, who wants to buy a Christmas present for his son, Teddy. You can see this video on the McFie Insurance channel. Alex eventually wants to use this policy for business expenses and business investments, but he's starting small and understanding how the process works by financing a Christmas gift for Teddy.
Because the infinite banking concept is unique and different than the way we've been trained to think about money, that's a really smart thing that Alex is doing. He's getting his toes wet in the water to see how this works, because he's planning to do it on a much larger scale with his business and expanding his business model. And he wants to make sure it works well with something small before he jumped into something big.
The infinite banking concept isn't a product itself. You can't go out and buy it. It's more of a concept. It's how you think about things. And how you think about things determines the actions you make and the results that you get. So we think about an iceberg, and an iceberg, just a little bit of it appears over the water. It's much larger underneath. And the same thing happens with the results that we have in our life. It really starts at what we think about. And our thoughts lead to choices that we make, actions that we take, and the results that we get. So we only see that little bit that's above the water. And This was a fascinating thing that I experienced on a cruise that we took through the Mediterranean. We were coming up to the south of France and we came into this harbor, but then it had to anchor there and we had to tender into the port. They said it was because the Alps, they were just coming down into the water at that point. And I think of the Alps way high up with lots of snow on them, but the Alps have to come down somewhere. And they came down into the water right there in the Mediterranean. And I never even thought about the Alps and the mountain ranges that are below the water. But that is the reality. And that's what happens with our finances too. And our thinking and this infinite banking concept, it starts at the thinking level and determines the choices and actions we take and the results we get.
That's so important to talk about, is how we think makes our choices, makes our actions, makes our results, because that's the key to making a good plan for 2025. And we want people to succeed in 2025. That's why we're talking about planning and giving these examples of Alex and Rachel, is because with a good plan, you can become a winner financially and other areas in your life. But it all starts at the thinking level. Rachel had to really think about, can I put away 12% of what I'm making and still make this work? And then she had to make a choice. What am I going to give up? What am I not going to buy? I'm going to give up that handbag that I want to get. I'm going to not buy a pair of new shoes every month. What am I going to do different? Am I going to stop going to Starbucks twice a day, maybe just once a day? Those are things that you have to make choices. But if you have never thought about it, it's not going to happen. And then that's going to change what you do, the actions that you do. And then the results are there. And it's such a joy to see the results from a good plan that starts from the very base of what you're thinking about.
Thinking about things is important. Even, when it comes to applying the infinite banking concept, the concept can be applied differently in different environments. I'm thinking back to 2020 when I wrote an ebook called Understanding the Infinite Banking Concept in Our Modern Environment. In the environment in 2020, interest rates were low and had been low for a number of years. And so part of what I was addressing in that book is, do you really want to take a policy loan in that environment when you can get a loan at the bank from 2 or 3% instead of the policy loan that might be at 5%? Doesn't always make sense to take a policy loan in that environment, but the conclusion was, when we went through the numbers, it still made sense to use the infinite banking concept in that environment. We just had to think about it differently and apply it differently. Now, today in the environment we're in 2024, going on 2025, interest rates have increased. Now, it often makes sense to take policy loans again. In fact, we have a number of clients who were using bank loans before and had their policy loans paid off. Now they're taking policy loans and transferring that debt to their life insurance policies. They're still using the infinite banking concept. They're just using it differently than they were in 2020.
Back in 2019, I was able to finance a truck at less than 2% and replace a pickup truck that needed to be replaced in my life. Few years later, when one of our daughters went to buy her vehicle, interest rates were over 6%. Now, let's just turn to the policy, because we can get money from the policy between 4 and 5%. Why should we pay 6% to somebody else? So that's why how we've used the infinite banking concept has changed how we implement it. It doesn't mean that the infinite banking concept doesn't work in those times. It's just that we have to be smart and apply the infinite banking concept where it does work.
And that's part of the premise of the infinite banking concept. Nelson Nash would talk about how you got to think different, to think like a banker. That's one of the reasons we have this banker hat up here. And sometimes during this show, we put it on to symbolize the fact that we're thinking like a banker.
So when do we borrow money from a policy? That's exactly what we're talking about right now. Do you borrow from a policy when you can get money from a traditional bank at 1.5%? Doesn't make sense. But when Nelson Nash was paying over 21% for raw land, and he could get money from his policies between 6 and 8%, that was a no-brainer. It's just that it took him a long time to discover that because of the way he was thinking. And he talked about that often. The way I was thinking was the way that everybody else thinks. And if we're going to think like everybody else thinks, we're going to get the results that everybody else gets.
When people were getting 0% on their savings at the bank, well, now that's different. People can use different accounts where they're getting like 3.9%. So people might wonder, well, is it still smart to buy a whole life insurance policy to implement the infinite banking concept? And yes, it is, because you're getting guaranteed growth on your money. You are creating cash value that you can access anytime, whether it's now in this financial environment or in a future financial environment, and you are putting more options on the table for your future.
We always need a place where we can put money that we're saving. Sometimes that can be in a bank account and earning a fair rate of return, as there are high yield savings accounts available right now that can provide a pretty nice return, but those rates of return are not always available in savings accounts. And so that's why it's smart to use participating whole life insurance as a long-term savings vehicle, because we can get that 3 to 4% internal rate of return if we're looking over a period of time, and it's not as dependent on the fluctuations of interest rates.
And John, if you need to access the money you have in one of those accounts, the 3.9%, you take that money out, your money's no longer earning that 3.9%, where you have money in a life insurance policy and you need to access the funds. You can access the insurance company's money.
Take a policy.
Your money continues earning a guarantee.
It does.
Right.
You pay interest to the insurance company, but your underlying policy continues growing. It's wonderful.
And in the case of my pickup truck that I bought in 2019, no, I didn't borrow the money from my life insurance policy. I borrowed the money from a credit union at less than 2%, but my policy is still growing and it's recovering the interest that I'm paying to the credit union, because I had the money there that I could have bought the truck with cash if I had just borrowed it. But now, because I haven't used it, it's waiting for a better opportunity to come along where I can make more money than what I have to pay the insurance company to use their money.
And this is exactly why participating whole life insurance is such a great financial tool. Where else can you do that? If you put money into a stock account and you had to borrow against that and take a margin loan, yeah, you could get it, but the margin loan is going to be a very high rate.
Yeah.
If you put money into 401k, let's say, and assuming you were able to access it, because some of the provisions that you can access it are pretty limited, but let's say that you could access it for whatever you needed to use those funds for. You access it, the money that you took out is no longer earning a rate of return in the 401k. Participating whole life insurance is one of the few places that allows you to have your money working in both places at the same time.
In fact, if you can borrow from your 401k, there is a requirement that you have to pay it back with interest. So now you're literally paying tax twice on that interest, because you pay it now when you pay the interest back, and then when you draw it out in the future, you pay tax on that interest again.
As you're setting your goals for 2025, it's important you use participating whole life insurance as part of your plan. It's also important to set goals for your future. Setting financial goals can be difficult.
They can. But again, if we sit down and get alone with ourselves and really think about what we want in life, it really just comes down to what we want, how committed we are to make different choices, and then the discipline to make that happen. And a lot of times the discipline part is the hardest. And so we need to become accountable to people. And Rachel was accountable to her family and to us. And we're not going to tell people what to do, but we're always there to rejoice with you when you meet your goals.
I think the reason many people find it difficult to set financial goals is because they're focused on the wrong thing. If they're setting a spending goal, they might say, I need to spend less. Don't set the goal that way. Say you're going to spend less than 70% of your after-tax income on lifestyle expenses. That's a specific goal that's also flexible and can grow with you. If you're setting a savings goal, don't say, I need to save more. Say, you're going to save 10% of your after-tax income. And if you don't have any debt, then maybe you could save 30% of your after-tax income. Do you think that could get you ahead a little bit faster in 2025? I don't think so. It'll get you ahead a lot faster.
New Year's is an incredibly popular time for people to make resolutions to improve their lives, to improve their futures. But tragically, it often ends up being the start of yet another failure. If you want to succeed, you need to decide on a plan and take actions to work your plan.
We want to encourage you to really take the time to think about what you want to accomplish in 2025. Make a plan. Once you've made a plan, you'll be able to make the choices that are necessary for you to take the actions that are going to give you the results that you want to accomplish in 2025.
And if getting started with the infinite banking concept is one of your financial goals, give us a call at McFie Insurance. We can help to make that goal a reality. Since 2007, hundreds of people have told us, I wish I would have started this sooner. I never heard anyone say, I wish I would have waited longer to get started. So give us a call at 702-660-7000, or you can email us team@mcfieinsurance.com.